What's going on, YouTube? Thanks for tuning into the channel. Welcome to Also Simplified. Coming to you with the video here about why you need to get your money up, not your funny up. The fall of the US dollar. And this is really brought to you by the end of the year is coming up. Do you want to be in the same spot you were in before? So I'm going to break this down for you, doing something a little different for the people that have watched my channel before. If you could, before we jump into this, hit me with that HBO special that help a brother out. Give me that like, the comment, a subscribe. Any feedback will do, but let's jump into this. So basically, in this day and age, you could definitely see there's a lot of strife, a lot of things that are going on. I live in the US, New Jersey to be exact. If you do live in an area like this, you can see politically lots of things are going on. You hear things about crypto. Obviously, the scamdemic was very recent. People are getting locked up for PPP loans. People are investing in gold. What's going on? What are you thinking? Prices are going up. When is it going to go back? It's not. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. So the first thing I'm going to bring is Ray Dalio, very big investor. Probably could look it up a little bit deeper exactly who he is and his background, but he wrote a really good book called The Changing World Order, which let me share this over to you right now. And I'm going to give him a little bit to kind of describe and really just set the stage for some of these things. So I'm going to pause throughout, but this is the main piece of this.
A year since that put out this changing world order, which showed these long-term cycles and the short-term cycles, and pretty much things have transpired along that arc.
So really, just to kind of set the stage, this whole book was basically he was going through different empires, and I have another video which I can walk through about all of the different economic empires that have gone through and how they've risen and fallen. But basically, he wrote a book about how throughout time empires rise and fall, and you hear this term like a new world order or the changing world order, and I never really thought about what that meant. The whole purpose of what this means is that in the world there is a order, there's a pecking order of countries that are running stuff. Now I don't think he gets into it in this video, but I want to bring up one big thing, and in my second video that's really the main piece of this. In After World War II, America established itself as the currency reserve currency, the reserve currency of the world. Therefore, any trade had to be done in dollars. That automatically puts a high demand on your currency and is the reason why I could go to Colombia, and I ain't trying to make this a family show, but I'm just saying you could hit the blade and get what you need right out there, and it's $70. But I digress. That's why people fly into the Philippines and Thailand and the passport bros even exist, is because you have dollars, which in the world order has been at the top my whole life and has basically been at the top since the 40s. But what he's saying is a lot of things are changing. Let me let him talk.
In other words, three big things: the creation of a lot of debt and printing of money,
COVID,
which has produced an
pandemic,
inflation acceleration, which has raised the
handing out
tightness
money,
of monetary policy
PPP
and
loans,
affected markets. Second, the internal conflicts between the left and the right and the
Trump
political
versus
developments.
Biden,
And that has to do with
Trump
social
versus
impacts and
Hillary,
all of that arguing and that division. And we're seeing it
LGBTQ,
reflected in the politics. And third, the great power conflicts. So we've
BRICS,
seen the war with Russia
you know,
develop,
yeah,
and then we've seen also, of course, the tensions and the approaching of a greater conflict with China as
yes,
there is a struggle for the power of the world and the changing
that's
world
the
order.
world order.
So that power, that arc, is continuing in the broad sense. And so we're at the brinks of these things. And as we watch them, you know, some things um, maybe are a little bit better, some things are a little bit worse. You know, when I described it, I said there's a 30% chance of some type of internal civil war. You know, 30% chance.
And I want to take a pause on this internal civil war. And actually, I'm going to switch over to another one because he's just kind of going to go through his conclusions. But like, even when you think about a civil war from an aspect, I think something that a lot of people don't talk about is really what, like, even dating apps, what, third wave feminism in terms of really a lot of like what's being pushed and what that has done to just the home, baby making in general, people's just outlook on things. I know my personal outlook, and I'm not really one of these guys that's like, women are all wrong. Like, I kind of fully understand why a lot of women want to just stay independent, stay single for a long time as well. Like, we've kind of been bred to do that. So maybe it doesn't even necessarily need to be a civil war that is, bloody to an extent, but with certain things with technology, the breakdown of the infrastructure, the social infrastructure, is also a civil war that could be.
Meaning that there's a conflict that maybe you don't follow the rules. 30% chance. I'd say there's a 35% chance now, roughly speaking. That doesn't mean it's likely, but you can see that we're on the brink of that.
So I just want to go into the last three things, and we're going to skip to a different video. But the last couple things I just want to touch on this whole piece with the whole changing world order. So you said those three things. So the debt. Um, all we ever hear, every news cycle, I mean, every political cycle, is the extent of the debt increasing, and basically each president is just adding more and more and more and more debt to this thing. So that is definitely very obvious. Um, the second one was, I think it was the internal conflicts. Yes, internal conflicts and things internally that are happening. We can obviously see from the political spectrum, and this has been going on for like a long time. If you really think about it, like, I was graduating high school when the whole Trayvon Martin thing happened. I didn't really undersee that turning into what ended up happening with the whole George Floyd thing, and then with the whole 2019, 2020, when everything got shut down, and then kind of where things are now. Like, there is a lot of conflict internally, whether it's on political lines, whether it's social versus the government, whether it's, I'm, like I was saying before, intergender, like just in relationships and stuff like that. Whether it's within your own self, people is changing their gender. Come on, like, a lot of things are changing out here. So basically, we're in that perspective. But now let's get to number three, the external conflict. I'm going to share this other video. Let me figure out if I know how to do this. I do this for a living. So we're going to get to Richard Wolff, who's going to talk about BRICS.
One of the major topics at the meeting.
Let's not go to that guy.
One of the major topics at the meeting of the BRICS in Kazan, Russia, 3 weeks ago was all about replacing the dollar. They are now, for example, conducting huge parts of.
So before I get deeper into this, I realize that some people might not know what BRICS is. So BRICS, if you don't know what it is, that it basically stands for Brazil, Russia, Indonesia, I believe, China, and is this Sri Lanka? Let's look this up. Let's look this up. BRICS. So the BRICS nations are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That's correct. Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Indonesia, and UAE are also part of it, but really the main ones are those five that I just mentioned. So that's who he's talking about. And basically, just some historical context, because I actually didn't preview this video. I just know I've watched him before, and he gets deep into this stuff, is that those countries basically came together in the mid 1900s, and were like, the US has a stronghold on everything, with themselves being the reserve currency. We don't want to be dependent on them anymore. So why don't we start teaming together and supplying each other with things, so that we don't have to go to Big Daddy and suckle on his nipple. So basically, they've been creating their own nipple. They've been creating their own little nest egg, their own little home, their own little place where some things are happening. And basically, that is what the main competition is, because they're no longer, as I was mentioning before, trading in that reserve currency
of their trading exchange in other currencies. It used to be, up until 3 or 4 years ago, that if country A needed to buy oil, for example, from Saudi Arabia or country B. They paid for it with dollars. Everybody had to have dollars in their account because much of the world's trade was conducted in dollars. Neither the exporter nor the importer wanted to worry about exchange rates among many different currencies. The dollar was safe. The dollar was secure. The dollar was backed by the United States. All of that is gone. And what you're seeing is the BRICS leading the way. One of the major.
So, and I want to stop here because I don't want to make this too long. But basically, what he's saying is that from a global perspective, the dollar is dying. Now, why did I start this with get your money up, not your funny up? Is that we're at a time now where you got to understand that, like, if you're not making moves to improve now, it's going to be infinitely harder later down the line. Now, I'm going to get into this thing that shows the world's largest economic powerhouses. And I'm going to point out different key time periods that all of us should have learned in history class of the empires that were at the top at this point. And if you think about it, why do people like to come to America? It's because things are booming. When you get dollars, you could send that money back. Like a lot of the people that come up from, South America, they be sending all this money back. Filipino ladies are freaking raising other people's kids and then sending that money back to the Philippines because the dollar is strong. But if the dollar is dying, then where are you going to be? Now, if you start to accumulate stuff at any of these countries that was ever an empire, there are people at the top that have a lot, but there is a large working class in a lot of these places. And one you can think of is like the UK. Why do people from the UK think of America as a place where you can make a lot more money when they think about like entrepreneurship? It's because of the taxes, because of the subsidies, all those things that are put out there. Because once the dollar starts dying, or once your currency starts dying, once your influence starts dying, the government is going to have to keep the masses from falling under. And what that they do is they basically just give everybody, the brave new world. They give you that soma dose. They give you just enough to keep you comatose. So you're just going to be there. You won't, scream. You won't get mad. You won't do anything wrong. And you'll just be happy. But your ability to jump classes is going to be diminished. And I think it's already kind of fading out with a lot of this AI and stuff. But if you are somebody that is like myself, that I love my parents and everything, and I'm not trying to say anything about, but like the life that they lived, I looked at a lot of struggle. And currently, even so, like they're older, they're in their 60s, and it's still like everything isn't set for them. I don't really want to live that life. Like I want when I'm in my 60s to be posted up on a boat with a bunch of nice little young tenders that I could just take on my yacht and ride around and just be, a dirty old man. That's my goal in life. And screw you if you don't like my goal. But basically, I understand I got to get my money up, or else I'm gonna be eating the government cheese with everybody else because the dollar is dying. So let's get into this last one. It's very interesting because people's concept of time, they look at America as being this powerhouse for forever, but really it's been about 100 years. And if you think about in the span of empires, that's not that long. Even in the span of like recorded BCE history, it's 5% of time, like if that, because you had the 25, it kind of changes things. It's even a little bit less. But let me jump into this next one and let's share that screen. So I'm sharing this one over here. So world's GDP. So this is going by GDP, which honestly is not like the best metric, but it's a metric to be used. If you want to find the sources and to validate the sources, I got to tell you, zero idea where any of this comes from. So, uh, let's look into it, but we're going to look 1560. What was happening here? Christopher Columbus and 1492. And we can see that China and Mughal, which is North India, like Bangladesh, that area was a very big empire. And then we got Turkey. Then we got all the people that were coming in here and taking over the uh the new land, so to speak. So let's start this. And I'm gonna skip through because it's like an 18-minute video. But we can see we can basically see during like the 1500s, this is what it looks like. So we got Spain at 4. So let's go a little bit further. 1625. We still got Spain and France. And if you think about it, Spain and France were conquering a lot of the New World, Portugal also, but one country we do not see here, and if you know anything about New Amsterdam or New York, the Dutch should be popping up soon because they manufactured a bunch of ships. So we're going to skip a little bit ahead and we can see the Dutch Republic 1655. Mughal Empire is thriving, exporting textiles, spices, jewels worldwide. So the reason why the Mughal Empire is going is because they had a lot of spices there, curry, a lot of that stuff, a lot of great stuff coming from that side of the country. But you can see the Dutch Republic is starting to rise, and that's because they manufactured a lot of the ships that came to the New World. So we're going to skip forward a little bit further. We can see the Dutch is still here. And then now all of this colonization is starting to really happen. England starting to pop up in the top. And now we're going to see a lot of the colonizing countries are going to start taking over because they're starting to gather all the crops that they can sell for free and all the free labor that they're getting. So 1770, Great Britain, France basically have jumped all of those other empires that were there. East India Company also kind of like it's a different thing, but it's kind of part of that whole Dutch Revolution. But East India Company was actually one of the first companies that owned, like they did a lot with that slave trade and things like that. So let's just keep skipping. I'm not even going to play it. I'm just going to skip to different time periods. So let's get to the 1800s now. Let's see how things have changed. So 1800s, Napoleonic Wars, French Empire is starting to get into like a crazy position. UK's at the top because they basically conquered a lot in terms of the colonization. So this is where the UK would have been the reserved currency. And you can see China's been kind of fighting for this position for a long time, and it's not really until a little bit later. So US, we won the Civil War recently. We're still kind of in the background. Now let's get to the mid 1800s and see how things have changed. So this is really where things change a lot. UK, French still have some kind of presence in terms of colonization, but they're going to start to decline because they don't really do that well in the next coming years. And then the US is starting to increase. And then we get to 1875, US passes France. France is definitely on their decline. And then we're going to kind of go quickly to the 1900s. And the US, basically, with the Industrial Revolution, starts to really take over a lot of these different, all of these empires, specifically these three, really try to scramble for Africa and colonize a lot of Africa. That's why there's a lot of French speaking and English speaking, as well as Dutch and other places speaking countries in Africa. And let's get to World War One. World War One, bang! That's where the U.S. took off. World War One took off, gained a lot of stronghold. A lot of it is also coming from the idea that we are not in the land of bombs. We are living in the land apart from everybody else. So that helps us a lot. And then we can skip a little bit further and look at World War II. And the US is still at the top, but that's where Germany starts to come up with their industrial powers and their ability to mobilize their military, and USSR, which is going to lead to like around the 70s and the Cold War. And Japan was doing well until now. Bang, dropped down. They got bombed. Now it is really, this is where the Cold War is going to start to come. So USSR, 65, Japan starts to rise, but I think a big piece is this Cold War that's going to start to happen in the 70s. And basically, since 1900, really, that is where Japan coming up. I didn't really realize this. I didn't watch this whole thing. Okay, Japan is still up there. And we can look at 2016. So look at this jump. That's a crazy jump. So Japan's here, China's all the way down here. And you also got to think in the 70s, China fell down because they had a cultural revolution where they like killed like a so much or deleted a lot of their population. But 90s, so Japan and US are right at the top. But then look at 2000s, China is making a huge surge. 2019, and then this is that piece that Ray Dalio is really talking about. This is that piece that Richard Wolff is talking about. And when you start to combine the countries that are BRICS, let's like see if we can get somewhere where it's all static. So Russia, Brazil, India. So let's just do math. Two and a half. We'll call that three. So 3 plus 2.5 is what? 5.5. Okay, that still ain't nowhere near. That still ain't. Oh, no, no. But then add 12. 5.5 plus 12. So you could see how that's competing. I don't know where South Africa is, but we can keep going further. So it's like we're 10 million away. But then when you start incorporating debt and stuff like that in the trajectory of the country in terms of balancing your book, things change a lot. So I know I said a lot here. This is a whole different type of format that I've never done, but I think I'm gonna try to stick to this. This is way easier than some of the other ways I do it. Hopefully, this is somewhat entertaining, informative. But the main net here is that you really need to get your money up because things are changing. We see that the world changes in different times. Your power of your money, your power to jump classes is going to be very integral to the time period that you're in. And I think this is really that last period where you could see that China is really kind of making that gain up. And then when you start adding up all the other countries that they're like partnered with, that there's, that's 4 million right there. So that's 22, 26. Um, 26 and then 28. So that's 28 right there. And we're not even adding we're not even adding South Africa and then all of the other countries that are moving and they are rapidly gaining more. And if you understand what China is doing, if we look at, this place over, wait, where is it when they're buying up Africa, when they're like colonizing Africa. Okay, so it's actually back here. Where they're colonizing the scramble for Africa. That's happening again. China is buying up Africa. Now they're doing it through deals and not actual colonization, but they're basically setting up lights, doing all this other stuff. So all this to say that there could be a world where the money that you're making today is not as strong in the future. And what you want to do is be able to get this money. And if investing wise, you'd want to park it in something else because the dollar will drop. But you want to get it while the getting's good. There will be a period where people aren't able to make the same money. Everybody's eating off the government cheese. So this is just my 2 cents. I'm just some guy that's just looking at this, trying to make it, trying to, live on a boat and be a dirty old man to myself with a bunch of kids. So that's really my life. If you like the content, you can like, comment, subscribe. If you don't like the content, leave some negative comments. Any feedback will do, but just help a brother out. Just try to give me some engagement here. Really love you guys. Until next time, you know what it is. Peace out.